bit about how you get into this, into the grid research. What first sparked your interest?
Well, the thing that first really sparked my interest in earth energies and grid research was the remarkable book called The Son of the Serpent by Hamish Miller and Paul Broadhurst. And that book really opened up the way I looked at history, because the way we're taught history at school doesn't really account for the true nature of it and the more subtle nature of it. And when I read that, I realised very quickly that there was a whole world of ancient knowledge and mysteries that weren't being addressed in the academic or the schooling system. And so this kind of really pushed the door open, and since then I've gone very deeply into that. And the thing that got me with that really was the idea that these earth energy lines, one of them actually went through were very near where I was living in Cambridge, a place called Wandlebury, and that had always been going there for years and years and years, and always felt there was something special about it, but didn't know why, didn't know what it was. Suddenly realised this great energy current went through there, and clocked why it was such a magical place. And then obviously that led to looking at the global versions of these energy lines, and how eventually I discovered that there's a potential great circle of this energy going all the way around the world that extends from England through many amazing ancient sites, and this kind of really opened up the grid research following that.
And you say it kind of starts in England, the grid. You talk about where it runs through in the English countryside, and what are the major markers?
Well, okay. So with the Michael and Mary line, to start with, we're looking at a great alignment that John Michell first discovered back in the late 60s and documented in his book The View Over Atlantis, and that stretches from the East Anglian coast down to right down to the Land's End in Cornwall. And as then Hamish Miller and Paul Broadhurst discovered two great energy lines weaving in and around them, going all the way across the country. And when I first looked at that, when I first read that book, I realised this must be global. They cannot have a line that long stretching across the longest part of southern England without it going all the way around the world. So that led to researching other ideas about that, other great alignments around the world, and John Michell had done other work on that, and many other researchers. And then I stumbled across the grid research, the Earth grid research. Specifically, initially it was William Becker and Beth Hargens, and how they'd put together this beautiful geometric system around the planet. And it kind of fitted in quite neatly with the Michael alignment, or the St Michael alignment, stretching across southern England. So immediately you see correlations just in your own backyard. And then that kind of spread all the way around the world. And you can see how, when you look at the grid images, you can see how land masses, especially Britain in particular actually, form along these particular lines of force, and how it seems to shape and work with the landmass around the world.
Can you explain the grid to us in kind of lay terms for the public, and what the Earth grid is, what the energy might be?
Regarding the Earth grid, there are quite a few theories about what it actually is, but there's quite a sort of elongated history to it as well. So it began really with the work of two lots of people really. There was the Russian researchers who were looking at various different aspects about how dodecahedrons could fit into an Earth system. One of their ideas, which is fascinating to me, was the idea that there was a great crystal millions of years ago, and through millions of years of rotation, planetary rotation, it ended up with landmass forming on it and got covered up and kind of disappeared. But then the energy system was still present and could be recorded upon the surface. And this is where their idea of a dodecahedron, and then later they added an icosahedron, which nest together, and they came up with this whole system. At the same time, Ivan Sanderson was a researcher again in the 60s. He was a biologist, but also a paranormal researcher. And he was looking at the Bermuda Triangle and other sort of strange anomalies that take around the world. He did a huge amount of data, and he gathered it and put it together into this coherent system of where strange anomalies and time dilations and gravitational effects were happening, and quickly realised that all the points where this was happening formed into like an icosahedron, like a global icosahedron. So that alone suggests a kind of energetic planetary grid at work. This was developed then later by William Becker and Beth Hargens, who were professors at universities in New England. and they kind of developed what they called the unified vector geometry system, and also they called it the rings of Gaia, which I feel is a much more sort of earthy kind of name for it. And they developed the system using Buckminster Fuller's geometries, which kind of gave it some kind of more structural strength if you look at it from a sort of builder's or a kind of architectural perspective. And then other researchers have sort of been developing this as well. So there's a whole idea that either there's a geometric system which naturally occurs within the planet, which is then observed and recorded by the ancients and now by us. And there's other ideas that it's a concept, and it's just an idea of a way to see the Earth and how the sacred sites connect, and also and how to work with geometries on a global perspective. And then, but you look at the ancient maps as well, the extremely ancient maps, and they seem to be working along the same principles. And we're looking at vast prehistory here. That's okay. I mean, am I waffling a bit? Okay. Where do you want me to go from?
Well, actually,
all of it. Okay.
No,
I don't need to talk about the maps. You can cut it off at the maps thing. I think we could go into that later, perhaps.
I'd like to ask about the difference between a lay and a magnetic line.
Okay.
When we get
Okay. Have you not had that kind of stuff covered by anyone yet?
Not really.
Okay. Cool. Okay, so it really is getting to basics, some of it, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah. Just say when. No, yeah, you can still hear it a bit. So a quick bit of revision.
Maybe quick mention of Bruce Gaffney, why?
Yeah, I was going to go into that as well. Yeah, I mean, maybe I should go into more detail about each particular development of the grid theory. Yeah, would that make sense?
I really like the time anomaly 12.
Yeah.
Because like that and the 19.7 and the 22.5.
Yeah, because those are
magic,
yeah,
you can't argue
definitely. Yeah, I mean, maybe we should just do that bit again then, because I can go into the detail of each process kind of thing. But there's also, I should just check with you while they're faffing about, but there's like prophecies as well, and there's the idea, I mean, that's all kind of in here. There's the quote from John Michel, which is a really good quote, the one I said at the start of the talk, quite long. And then there's the Book of Enoch stuff about how the...
We could put the quote up in text. Prophecy...
Mention it.
We could get it, but I probably
Okay.
won't use it, to be honest.
Okay, fair enough.
We just get into such dodgy territory potentially there once we go.
Yeah. Well, it's more like a creation myth, really.
Oh, like the Hopi web? No, that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can mention that. Because that brings in the crystals in the centre of the earth as well.
Is it really windy outside?
Yeah, I think it's raining.
Picking up wind.
It's wind?
Doesn't play anymore.
Yeah. In that case, we're good.
Can I have this down here? You can't see it.
Yeah, you can't.
Okay.
So we'll pick up with the difference between lays and magnetic lines.
Yeah, and we do the grid history thing again, I reckon, as well.
Yeah. I mean, you know better than me. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
So just prompt me here.
Right. So can you tell us the difference between a magnetic line and a ley line, and give us a brief history of the grid and how it was discovered?
There are quite a few differences between ley lines or lays and earth energies or magnetic lines, for instance. Many people get these mixed up, think they're the same thing. But with ley lines, or lays is the sort of correct term that Alfred Watkins coined in the 1920s, is an alignment of several ancient sites and churches, all in an alignment over a distance, maybe 4 to 6 sites. And he saw them more as sort of roadways or pathways and routes for trade, rather than anything mystical or energetic. So specifically, they're more to do with like mapping a straight line over a distance, and that's a ley. Whereas when you get into the earth energies, when you get into the magnetic lines, it's a whole different story, although they are very much connected. And this is seen with the St Michael alignment that was discovered initially by John Michell, which stretched all the way across southern England, which he first discovered by noticing an alignment between the Glastonbury Tor, and Burrow Mump, which is about 12 miles away. And then he developed it from there. But this is, again, just an alignment, a straight line across the landscape and on a map. But then later that was developed by Hamish Miller, Paul Broadhurst, and they found two great energy currents weaving like a caduceus around this line. So instantly people will get confused because they think it's the same thing. Well, actually they're completely different. So when you're looking at earth energies, you're really looking at connections with the magnetic field of the earth. You're looking at, some people might class it as more of a spiritual kind of energy that moves through the earth. There's lots of energies within the earth that we can record. There's underground water that creates an electric charge or electromagnetic energy along the surface, which was developed and worked with by Guy Underwood. And then there seems to be energies between ancient sites. You can actually dowse from one site to another, and this gets confusing because a ley line will go from one site to another as well. So there's all these connections, but there are differences between them, and it is good to know the difference. I mean, Sig Longren, he came up with the term energy ley, where you can actually dowse a ley line, which is like a map alignment, and find energy along it as well. So you can see why there's a grey area there, and there's lots of different ways to look at it. So when you're dowsing, for instance, when you're researching, you really have to focus on what you're looking for, and then you kind of focus on that, and then you can move into other systems and work on that. This is the kind of way I work. And it's the same thing with grids as well, because if you're looking at grids across a landscape, or across the planet even, you can apply it to natural earth energies, or you can apply it to alignments and geometries that form when sites and places are joined together. And if we look at the history of grids just for a few moments, we can start to see there's a progression which brings these disciplines together. There's lots of very ancient clues as well to the idea that there were grids in antiquity, and they were used by the ancients. There's a huge amount of research now which proves that the world was mapped, it was surveyed, and it was travelled in vast prehistory, possibly going back 10,000 years. And people were sailing around the world, they were sharing this high knowledge, and they were developing ideas and communicating over great distances. And many of these ancient sites, you can see that this is the case. They're very similar designs. We see pyramids all over the world, we see dolmens, megalithic chambers, literally all over the world. You'd be surprised. I just got a call yesterday from a friend of mine who'd just been to Korea, and he just found out that there were 19,000 dolmens in Korea, and this kind of surprised me somewhat, because I do present that there are dolmens all around the world, and there's a few here and there, but to find out there was 19,000 in Korea just alone, it shows you the greatness of the ancient sort of architecture and work that was being placed all around the world. And it wasn't just a few people here and there, it was a cultural movement that was taking place, going over decades, if not centuries. And so when we're looking at, and also you can look at the Book of Enoch, for instance, the very ancient, potentially it's one of the lost books of the Old Testament. This is one idea about where it came from, and rediscovered in the 1700s. And in that book there's clues about the fact that they were surveying around the world, how great cords were given to the angels, and they took them and measured, and they went to all different parts of the world to do so. So again, we find all these little clues. But if we start to look at the history of the sort of modern grid research, we really have to start with two groups of people, really. First of all, there's the Russian scientists, who in the early 70s were working on the idea that once the Earth was a great crystal, like a geometric crystal at the centre of the Earth, and over millions of years after rotating, it gathered Earth upon it, and then it was forgotten about. And then they believed that energy signatures coming from that crystal could still be recorded on the surface of the Earth. Now, this was a scientific revelation in Russia at the time. It didn't really get out to the West, but it caused quite an impact throughout the world, and a few independent researchers were kind of looking at this. But about the same time that happened, roughly the same time, I think in the early 70s, we have Ivan Sanderson, who was a biologist and he was also a paranormal researcher. And he came up with the idea of the vial vortices, which I think is quite a funky little name for what he's talking about. But he wrote an article called The 12 Devil's Graveyards Around the World, and published again in the early 70s. And he was looking at the Bermuda Triangle really as his main sort of source of, to get data from. And he, after years of research, he came up with the conclusion that were lots of disappearances, magnetic anomalies, gravitational effects, time dilations, and many other strange occurrences. When he plotted them around the world, there were 12 particular places they kept happening. So, and one of them obviously was the Bermuda Triangle. There was the Devil's Triangle off the coast of Japan, an area around Hawaii, Easter Island as well, and also obviously the North and South Poles, where there's the largest magnetic anomalies and gravitational anomalies on the planet. And but when he plotted them on a map, he noticed quite quickly that they formed the points or the vertices of the icosahedron, which is one of the main platonic solids. And this kind of opened up the idea that there was an energy system, a global geometric energy system working within the Earth, and the effects were evident on the surface. And this is a very important point when looking at any type of grid research or applying geometry to a planet. Soon after that, Bruce Cathy is a New Zealand airline pilot. He was often out, he was very good at what he did apparently, and he was able to plot where he kept seeing many UFO sightings. Now this kind of freaked a lot of people out, I guess, in New Zealand. His research did at the time, but he kept seeing them. He kept plotting exactly where they were, and came to the conclusion that they were going in straight lines at right angles across the sky and across the landscape. Formulated a grid over New Zealand, where he was based, and came up with the idea that perhaps they were following some kind of natural geometric energy system within the Earth. So again, we start to see other clues about a grid. At the same time Bruce Cathy was doing that, in France, a researcher called Aimé Michel, he was finding the same things. He kept seeing UFOs as well, and kept plotting them and finding that they were moving at certain angles across the landscape. And again, it was very similar to what Bruce Cathy had discovered. So they sort of put their heads together, and Bruce Cathy eventually came up with a global system where he was able to sort of believe there was something more profound going on all around the world. And these ETs, or these UFO pilots, whoever they may be, were actually working and empowering their crafts through a natural energy grid, or potentially a very ancient constructed energy grid. So this is the other idea that a lot of people have, that many of the ancient sites around the world, the pyramids, the stone circles, the dolmens, and all the other megalithic structures and temples, were actually part of an energetic system. Potentially, as the Atlantis word pops up occasionally, but we really have to look at it that there was a global culture. They were travelling around the world and developing very high-grade technologies, as far as I'm concerned, as far as many other researchers are concerned. So with Bruce Cathy, he developed and came up with the cube and the octahedron combination within the Earth, whereas Ivan Sanderson, he came up with the icosahedron. So there's 3 of the platonic solids already found, but there's 2 more, which are the dodecahedron and the tetrahedron. So if we look at the tetrahedron, we have to look at the work of Richard Hoagland, who was doing, he was the popularized the whole idea of pyramids and the face on Mars. And he noticed often during his research that when he kept looking at all the alignments and data throughout the landscape of the Cydonia region of Mars, he kept coming up with this 19.5 degree anomaly and angles between all these sites. And he quickly realized that when you place a tetrahedron in a sphere, the point will touch at 19.5 degrees above or below the equator, depending on which way you put up the tetrahedron, which precisely is 19.47. And so immediately he noticed that the Olympus Mons volcanoes, which are the largest, most powerful volcanic system in the solar system, is at 19.5 degrees on Mars. And on Earth, we have the huge volcanoes of Hawaii, which are the largest on Earth. And there are other anomalies he noticed throughout the solar system. For example, he noticed there was increased sunspot activity on the sun, obviously, at 19.5 degrees, and various other anomalies on other planets. There's many other geometries and things that have been found on the other planets too, which we can have a look at that as well. The other geometries, which possibly the most important breakthroughs in the Earth grid research, is the work of William Becker and Beth Hargens, who developed the Russian research, which was based on the dodecahedron, but they also nested an icosahedron within that, which is basically they perfectly fit together into a nice coherent system. And they worked upon them principles and applied the work of Buckminster Fuller upon that to give it more structural integrity, and came up with what they called the rings of Gaia initially, because there's great Earth circles around the world that then create the geometries from that. Then they came up with a more developed unified vector geometry system, which kind of just brought everything together. And fundamentally, it's based upon the icosahedron and the dodecahedron with Buckminster Fuller's applications, which becomes then what's called the rhombic triicontohedron. And that kind of is like the classic Earth grid system you've probably seen in books and on other documentaries and so forth. And so there's a lot to be said for that, and everything kind of clicks into place with their system. But fundamentally, all the other research that all the other people have done, it all clicks in with that as well. This is the key. And so basically what we're seeing is all the different platonic solids come together into the Earth, into this coherent unified vector geometry system, which is what my research is basically based on.
Great. Yeah. Just be careful with the book when you.
Oh, sorry. Okay, I'll get it out of the way. I don't need it.
So can you either sit on something or just get a little bit taller?
Yeah, sure.
Who, me?
No, you're fine.
Oh,
You're
okay.
great. I just like when you look at Charlie, I just want him to be a little bit taller. Great.
Did that sound okay? Did I waffle? Did I?
Brilliant.
Yeah. Okay.
That's
Cool.
exactly
Right.
what we wanted, yeah.
Okay.
I guess the next question would be, why should we give a toss about all these Earth grids? As modern man, why should he stop from his busy day and his schedule and pay attention to this? What's the possible application for him of Earth grid?
Do you want me to go into like the sort of Earth energy sort of fertility stuff? Yeah, you'll do that in a bit. Yeah.
You could either segue into John Burke, or do you want to comment at all about the possibility of free energy, Tesla, that kind of thing? Is that not your real?
I don't think I could effectively. Yeah, I think I'll leave that one.
So then let's definitely
Okay.
work our way towards why should modern man give a shit?
Yeah. Okay.
So, why should modern man care?
So modern man should give a shit because.
Why should modern man care about this?
Okay, let me just let me think about this. What do you mean about the Earth grid in particular? I'm gonna, yeah.
Yeah, that would help if you just that would be great.
Okay.
I guess we could say, why should modern man care about the possible technologies being described by this grid?
Okay. So we really must ask, why should modern man be concerned about this kind of knowledge and research and this technology? I think when we look at the work of Bruce Cathey, I think this is possibly one of the most esoteric and important aspects, because what we're seeing with his research is he's convinced, and he pretty much believes he's proved, that the ET crafts, or whatever these crafts are, wherever they came from, are powered by a system that is on the Earth. So they're using an energy of the Earth. And you could look into free energy technology potentially with this too, which is something that Bruce Cathey is quite into, and it's all based upon harmonic mathematics and how that's applied and combined with the geometries of the Earth's grid system, basically. But I think when we're looking at this kind of system, number one, the importance of it could be there could be free energy available naturally from the Earth. I think that's an obvious one. But there's also, it seems like the ancients had an application for this, and they were working with some kind of geometric or earth energy system around the planet. And you can see this by the proliferation of sites everywhere. and they were obviously doing something with this, and they travelled the whole world to kind of find this and work with this. So there's something in that possibly we haven't quite worked out yet. And I think things like the crop circles and things like certain discoveries that are coming forth about the geometries and technology within the ancient sites themselves is helping to unlock this. But there's lots of different aspects to consider there, because and I think obviously, you know, when we look at Britain, in fact, sorry, I've lost my trail of thought there. you can cut that there, yeah, you can cut that there. I mean, I don't know the answer to your question properly. That's basically it. Why do I care? I don't know. I'm mad. I don't know.
Well, I mean, if I was answering, I would say,
yeah.
so much fucking time putting these.
Yeah. I mean, when you get into the megalithic stuff, yeah. But when you're talking about just a concept of a grid, yeah. I mean, it's just something that kind of, yeah.
I mean, like the internet. I mean, could you make that analogy? This is where you tune in. This is where you can talk about stuff that isn't. I mean, we talked on the phone briefly about the possibility that there's a consciousness interface. Yeah,
right, okay, yeah, and there is the psychic kid thing as well, which is quite well known now, quite valid, the indigo kid thing.
Do you want prompting?
No, so I'll just go into it, I think. There are other more esoteric applications for working with the grid, which I became aware of actually through the indigo children, through this new kind of breed of children, really, that seem to be incarnating on Earth. And I've written a book about the subject as well, and given it a lot of thought and a lot of research. And one of the conclusions that these kids came up with when they work around the world is that there seems to be a kind of almost like a psychic kind of consciousness grid, which is kind of almost, they feel it's kind of new, even it's not even ancient, but it's a reflection of the ancient one that is there still. And they feel that they can communicate through that, and they can communicate with other beings through it as well, whether they be ET beings or whether they be dolphins and whales under the sea. Because fundamentally, you know, we must remember that, you know, majority of the planet is covered in water, and so this grid and these earth energies and all these kind of ley lines and stuff actually mainly go through the sea. And so who's dealing with that and who's working with that? And it seems like, according to these kids anyway, especially one called Grandmother Chandra, she believes that the dolphins and the whales are really the true keepers of the planet, and they're the ones who not only work with the grid the most, but they use it effectively. Whereas us humans on the surface have kind of forgotten, and we've got caught up in the material world and have lost contact with it. When applied to the ancient side of it, there's lots of ideas and theories about, was this an energy grid? Was this used like we use electricity today? Was it used as an energetic system? Were these sites built specifically to balance earth energies, to bring harmony to the planet? Or was there kind of a communication system? We don't know. This is all really speculation at the moment, but it just seemed like there was a great purpose and a great amount of energy put into this. A huge effort over generations, possibly, you know, over 1,000-year period, more or less, to build these sites into such accuracy. And so to me, there was an element of compassion with that as well, because these sites were built for future generations. They weren't just built for us. They weren't just built for the people who constructed them. And that's basically the way we work today. We build things for just the next few years or the next couple of decades. They built them for 1,000 years or several thousand years. So that's a sign of compassion to me, when you're looking out for your future generations. We just don't have that anymore.
Sorry, Rooster wanted to add. Let's use this opportunity to segue into crop circles, and then through there we'll get to Burke's work.
Yeah.
What's that? Yeah. Were you going to rough him up, the rooster?
Rough up the rooster.
Sorry. So yeah, let's I'll ask you. Why do you think crop circles are bringing our attention back to these megalithic sites?
Crop circles appear to be bringing our attention back to megalithic sites and other ancient temples across, especially Britain, really. I mean, although crop circles do appear, sporadically in other countries, generally they seem to be in Britain. All around, Avebury seems to be the centre point. Avebury, Silbury Hill are really the kind of hub of where all this comes from. So is there a connection with that? Were the ancients involved in putting some kind of magic into the ancient temples that eventually manifest today? We just don't know. But what we're seeing with these crop circles is that they're opening up doorways of the imagination and of the mind and of the heart to understanding the ancient ways. And obviously they take you out into the landscape because you want to go and get inside some of these circles. So you're going out into this ancient landscape, probably to a spot in the landscape which no one has been on for hundreds, if not 1,000 years, because they're often in the middle of farms in a cornfield. And so it could be something to do with humans going out to these sites and actually triggering and affecting the earth energies and the lays between sites. So there's this kind of thing to consider as well. They also help us get out into the landscape. They help us study geometry. Where if you're a dowser or geomancer, you'll start looking at the earth energies and the lays that link up the crop circles with ancient sites. But one of the most important aspects, I think, is the geometry, really, because if you start studying the number and geometry of crop circles, quickly you find that the same number and geometry was being used in the stone circles and the pyramids and other ancient sites. And so it seems like the same principles at work within these modern temples, these modern temporary temples, the crop circles, or the ancient temples, the megaliths. The other thing about Britain, which is interesting relating to crop circles, that it's only really in Britain that you get stone circles. You get a few around the world, but you get there's over 900 recorded stone circles in Britain. And so, it's just interesting to me that the largest stone circle in the world, Avebury, is the central hub of the crop circle. So whether there's some connection with that is up for debate, but certainly it's worth noting that kind of statistic. There's other aspects of the crop circles. One of the things that particularly interests me about the crop formations is the way they draw people into different aspects of the imagination. I mean, in the Sun and the Serpent book, the Hamish Miller Paul Broadhurst book, they noted that, I think it was in 1998, that every single crop circle that appeared in Wiltshire that summer appeared on the Mary line. And I met someone a month ago who said the same thing, that many of the most impressive crop circles of this season, 2009, appeared on the Michael or Mary energy lines. So is there a connection there? So we've got to ask, are the energy lines actually somehow creating the crop circles or interacting with something to create them, or the crop circles magically appearing and the energy lines are kind of drawn to them? One example of this, which particularly grabbed my imagination, was the angel formation that appeared near Wandlebury, near Cambridge, in 2001, in July 2001, because it ran very close to the Mary line, and we'd recorded where we'd dowsed and measured where the Mary line was in the landscape way before this crop circle appeared, a couple of years before. When we went to look at this angel crop circle, we noticed that it had pulled the Mary line about probably over 100 feet off course, brought it into the crop circle, created a strange kind of magnetic or some kind of anomaly within part of the crop circle, and it went back and returned to its original course. So we're seeing a major interaction between the two, between earth energies and the crop circles.
Triggered my memory. Can you talk about the dolmens and the magnetic anomalies? Because that was great when you talked about that.
That's starting to go into John Burke stuff a bit, isn't it? Yeah. Okay, that's cool.
Yeah.
Well, okay. Well, okay. I'll start. What I'll do is I'll because all that research came from crop circles.
Okay.
Initially, so I'll give that story.
That's BLT, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Brilliant.
Sorry. Start again. There are many other disciplines and discoveries that have come from the crop circles as well. One of the most fascinating ones from my research really is to do with the fertility energies of these earth energies themselves and the way the ancient sites interact with these. The BLT research team from America, they did a bit of research, and they found that they went to a crop circle site where one had appeared the year before. And so they went back to that site just to have a look at the field, to see what was going on there, and found that all the crop there was actually exactly where the crop circle had appeared previously, was growing much stronger, had more yields, and was just much more healthy than the rest of the field, just where this crop circle had appeared. So something during the creation of the crop circle, or just the crop circle being there, had actually stimulated the corn and the crop to grow better and to produce more yield. And this really interested them, because there must be some kind of electromagnetic charge taking place here that caused that effect. So they then developed that idea and actually applied similar energies and developed it actually into a sort of agricultural business, where people could take their seeds along to them and they could charge it up in a certain way with electromagnetic energy, similar to what obviously would happen in the crop circles. And people would take the seeds away and it'd grow better and more yield, be stronger, frost resistant, and all this kind of stuff. And then they thought, well, actually, let's apply this let's have a look at the ancient sites, because the ancient sites are always connected with the crop circles. They're always in the vicinity. There's been reports of strange energies and anomalies and orbs or balls of light appearing there. And so they initially looked at some of the sites around Britain and Europe, but then they applied it also in North America, because up in New England, the northeastern states, there's a huge amount of megalithic sites up there, dolmens and chambers, and they found similar things there. So what they found basically was, what the fundamental sort of technology they rediscovered was a fertility technology, and how they kept noticing that orbs of light would appear in their photographs, and sometimes they would be seen by certain people. And they felt, well, there must be some kind of electromagnetic or charge there that would create this. And then they decided to test to see if there was a charge within these sites themselves. So they placed seeds within them for between 45 minutes and a couple of hours. They did lots of different experiments. There's no rule book on this. It was all being rediscovered as they did their research. They placed their seeds in these sites for a particular length of time where they felt it was the strongest point, because they had magnetometers and electric volt readers, and they were able to detect the strongest kind of anomaly. They place these seeds in the site, and then they go and plant them, and then they plant alongside them controls that hadn't gone in the site at all. And immediately, when the crop started growing, they would get much better yield from the ones within the sites. And so, amazingly, they rediscovered one of the ancient technologies that many of these sites potentially were designed for, which potentially could be the most important discovery in the megalithic world over the next couple of decades, because we may need to know how to grow our own food and to make sure our seeds are strong and we can grow abundantly. And these still work. That's the thing, they work after thousands of years. This is the most amazing thing. And so I believe that what they discovered was not only one of the ancient technologies, but they discovered the implications that this was a global phenomenon, because they looked all around the world. It wasn't just in North America, it wasn't just in England, it was all around the world, in South America, going over to the east as well, and through southern parts of Europe, and the same principles kept occurring. It seems that the natural magnetic field of the Earth creates these telluric lines that move through the surface of the Earth. And somehow these ancient sites would harness this and bring the energies to a certain point within it. But also, they found that many of these sites were built upon a magnetic anomaly. And so there was a natural magnetic anomaly there that had been recognised by the ancients, and then sites were built upon that spot. And then this would enhance the grains and the seeds when placed in there. And it's quite confusing science when you get into all the geology and the movement of energies through the Earth, but there is a lot of science to back this up now. And so it's a combination of magnetic anomalies, electric charge, because there's changes in the geology as the telluric lines move through, and this will create charge, and this is often where the sites were put. And so the charge would then be the thing that creates the strength and the quality of the seed increase, So there's lots of different aspects to this particular point, which I won't go into them all here. But they found that because it was all around the world, it also gives credence to the idea that this was a technology that was passed on through the ancient cultures. It was part of the design of these ancient sites, and could have been one of the reasons why these people, whoever they may have been, travelled the world sharing this knowledge. There's also, in North America, it's not just the megalithic sites up in New England. The whole mound culture, they discovered the same technology was being applied there, right down the Mississippi, from Iowa all the way down through the Midwestern states to Florida. And the same principles were at work. And one of the things there's two things they kept finding, that tribes from many hundreds, often hundreds of miles away, would travel to this particular mound or this particular megalithic site in different parts of America, place their seeds there, make an offering, always in the morning, because when the sun rises, this energy seems to increase, and then go away and plant their crops. And it was like a blessing from the gods. But actually now there's science to back that up, that there was something more than that going on. But, you know, basically it's the same thing. The other aspect was that the culture that had a mound within their society was always richer than the culture that didn't. So what they were doing, they were using the technology and building upon these magnetic anomalies and sort of getting people, you know, to come in and place the seeds, either charging them for it or producing more crop than they needed, and then they could trade with it. So they would become a richer culture. And this same thing could be applied to Stonehenge and Avebury. They think Avebury was a great generator of fertility, and all the fertility rites that people think may have gone on there could have been the same thing. We look at Silbury Hill, for instance. We know that that's layers of like organic, non-organic material, and creates a huge amount of energy. It's like an orgone accumulator. And then we have the Michael and Mary lines moving down the megalithic avenues into the main circle, which kind of moves the energy around. And the tests that John Burke and his team did there were finding the same thing, finding the same anomalies. So they think it could have been used as the central point of southern England, which people would come for hundreds of miles around for, and do their sort of place their seeds in the right spot, and then go away and grow them. So there's all these things to consider, and we're really at the early stages of this research, but I must credit the BLT research team for kind of finding this, especially John Burke.
Thank you. How are we doing with that fucking rooster?
Keeps coming in and out, but it's not too distracting.
Yeah.
Shall I go and chase it away?
Is that possible?
Yeah.
It was so good, and it kept
Would you really go on again?
Yeah. My next question would be, who do you think is responsible for this technology? Who brought it to us?
Okay. So I just want to sit for a sec. So when looking at this ancient technology, we really must ask, where did it come from? I mean, this is really the big mystery with these megalithic sites and the pyramids. No one actually knows who really put them there or why. One idea which really gets me, and it links in with the fertility technology, is the ancient cultures that seem to have appeared we're not sure when, but many thousands of years ago. For example, in South America, we have Viracocha, or Viracocha Contiki, who seem to appear out of nowhere across Lake Titicaca, or from other stories say sort of from the Atlantic area. And they were very tall people, sort of long flowing white beards and bright blue eyes. They wore robes, and they were very articulate and generous, and they brought compassion, and they brought kind of understanding to the tribal peoples of South America. And one of the things they brought was the building of these ancient sites, how to do it, how to summon lightning even and create magic, but also how to develop sort of communities and like cultural systems within even marriage. They are said to have brought. And one of the ideas that they actually brought this technology with them, because when you look at some of the ancient sites in South America, in Peru and Bolivia, Tiwanaku and other places, John Burke and others found the same principles of fertility were present there. And there's some stories that Tiwanaku was actually 17,000 years old, so we could be looking at that kind of era, but we're not too sure about that. And so, and the other aspect is, basically, it wasn't just South America that these kind of people turned up at. They kind of turned up in Mexico and Guatemala. We have the story of Quetzalcoatl. In Egypt, we have Osiris. In Ireland, we have the Tuatha De Danann, who was, again, the description of them and the technology and the sort of goodwill that they brought to the land was all the same. So they all seem to come from one source and spread out around the world. But the Viracochans stuff really interests me, because certain stories, are found throughout South America, from tribes in the Amazon, from cultures near Cusco. There's lots of different places these come from. One of the things they say is that they came almost like they came on boats that made no sound and had no oars on them. Another story is that they came in a golden flying ships with wings and landed there. So this kind of stuff is quite interesting because it suggests potentially a high technology of the very ancient peoples. And so the one idea is that it came from these people, this technology came from these people, and they taught people how to build these sites for a purpose. Much of it was astronomical, especially in Britain. When we get the stone circles and stuff like that, we find that they're astronomically oriented, so you can have them as a farming agricultural calendar. The same principles apply to the ancient sites in South America and Egypt and other parts of the world, that they were developing kind of calendar systems, so then you could stop being a hunter-gatherer and grow food, all in different parts of the world. And then the fertility technology we've already talked about was probably applied with that. So there's a whole theory developing about that and about who these people actually were. But the problem with the story is, the sort of a sad ending to the story is that in the case of South America with Viracocha and with Quetzalcoatl, they got harassed by some of the locals because they weren't pleased about changing their culture and all this kind of stuff. And they were driven out, and they left again on their either in their golden flying machines or on their boats and disappeared, but promised they would come back, but never did. And so the problem was, when the Spanish came back, they thought these were the white people of ancient times, the Viracochans, the Quetzalcoatls and stuff, but they weren't, obviously, and they kind of caused a lot of damage and destruction to the cultures that were still revering the ancient peoples who had deserted them. So there's this very interesting kind of ancient stories there. And even in South America, it's been reported, it's quite a few times that some of the tribes in the middle of the jungle near the Amazon and so forth were actually white people, speaking various different languages, which the Viracochans were said to have done. They could speak multi-languages. They could speak any local dialect they came in contact with, which I find really interesting, because to me that potentially means they were telepathic, and it was more of a visual kind of mind thing, which could have been more present, more available then, if you like. People could have been more tuned into that. But again, the whole story, all around the world, we find these stories, so it's just, you can't really dismiss them. I think there's something there to be looked at.
Let's see, can we kind of segue now and back into the sorry, it's the train into the modern Russians, what the Russians are doing right now.
Oh, yeah.
The juicy stuff.
I mean, I haven't got much on that. I've only got the little pyramid thing, but I could just follow on from
That's perfect.
the ancient technology. Okay. Let me just check my notes here. I see details of it.
I'm gonna stop real quick.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, we're rolling, yeah.
Yeah. Good. So I forgot, what was the question?
It was to do with continuing on with the Viracocha stuff, really, and how it applies to the global Earth energies.
Yeah. So
That's cool. I can go into it if you want.
okay.
I know, yeah, mine's getting a little bit like that. Okay, let me just. So when we're looking at global Earth energies, this does actually fit in with the whole Viracocha story in a bizarre sort of discovery that I made when I was down at Lake Titicaca in Peru, or Bolivia-Peru border. And when I was on the island, there was an idea that the Michael and Mary lines actually go all the way around the world, also known as the rainbow serpent, according to a guy called Robert Kuhn, who kind of rediscovered this. And his sort of concept of it, they go through Lake Titicaca, and I thought that's interesting. So I had an opportunity to go there. It's actually on Lake Titicaca. It's a very high lake. It's several thousand meters up, so you've got the clouds virtually touching the lakes. It's a very unusual landscape. It's almost like a sea, it's so big. But on the island of the sun, the very northern point of the island, I found this quite large megalithic structure. It was like a dolmen, really, and it had a large slab on it with 4 smaller stones holding it up. Very neat and tidy. And underneath it, actually in the ground, was a very large stone, which didn't look like it was from the island itself. And so I dowsed around there. I didn't have any particularly scientific instruments on me, but I did a bit of dowsing, and I found this particular energy line, quite a strong energy line going through it. And it also went through this frog effigy, which is like a huge kind of natural formation that the ancients or the Inca had obviously carved a kind of frog sort of effigy onto it. And there it crossed another line, another energy line, and where this actually happened, I noticed lots of offerings had been made under like the chin of the frog. And I soon quickly realised and remembered that the frog in some Inca traditions is a fertility symbol. So we're looking at this fertility kind of technology again, and potentially this could have been a site, part of the island, where these great global energy lines were crossing, and where people placed their seeds and did their rituals and all that kind of stuff. So whether that's linked with viricocha, we really don't know at this point. But we see these sort of things happening. On the southern part of the island, the Mary Line went through this particularly ancient sort of some ancient steps that the Inca had built, or pre-Inca possibly, and all the way up to this sort of mini little temple on the southern part of the island. And then right through the centre of the island is what's called the plumed serpent energy line. And this is another great earth circle of energy that goes the opposite sort of way around to the world that the Michael, the rainbow serpent does, which you'll probably be able to see on the graphics. And so this just kind of summed up and sort of proved to me personally that this is a global system. We're not talking about grids here. We're talking about these extension of the Michael line in England that also goes through my local site of Wandlebury in Cambridge. I'm finding the same energy line in Peru or Bolivia. So this, the way this unfolds within one's consciousness and research, it's almost like with the crop circle. It's a message that's slowly being given to you, step by step. And so this research is still developing as we go along it, really.
Right. Let's get on to the Russian
science.
So this is actually being applied, this technology, by scientists in the modern world. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. This fertility technology that John Burke and others came up with is not only being applied by them in their labs and also tests done at the ancient sites, but in Russia over the last 20 or 25 years, some scientists there have been building some pyramids. They're very kind of thin and tall pyramids, but they're based upon the golden section, and they're based upon the same principles as the great Egyptian pyramids as well. And they're just doing experiments with these. They're placing them at locations around the landscape, on farms and other places, and finding some really remarkable results with them just by building them there. They're finding, for example, in the fields surrounding them, all the crops are growing better and stronger, as Burke discovered in his research. And also, actually, when seeds are placed within them, the same thing. You go and plant them, you get higher yield, better quality. Also, water doesn't freeze within these pyramids for some reason, which is, I don't know quite what application they could be used for, but it's just an interesting point. And there's other examples. One of the most important examples to me is the fact that an extinct flower that had been gone for decades returned into the surrounding fields of where some of these pyramids were. So that, to me, is just remarkable, because it's showing you the power of these sites. And if the ancient sites were working in the same way, maybe they were put there because after some ancient cataclysm, which has many theories and science that kind of backs this up, going back to 10,000 years and 3,500 years BC, then we're looking at it could have been built to harmonise the energies of the earth and to actually restructure kind of the energies to help humans and life thrive on it. And maybe these Viracochans and others knew this, and they had a high technology, and they were able to work with this across the landscape. So what the Russians are doing is that helped, along with Burke stuff, unlock a very ancient science, which was probably shrouded in mysticism and mystery, which is now coming out again in a scientific form, and people are able to apply this in the modern day.
Great. Okay, now it's time for you to plug your stuff.
Okay.
Do
you want me to go like that?
Well, we'll have an insert. We will.
Yeah,
But
sure.
what I'll ask you is, no one, very few people, other than the Russians, seem to be trying to apply this technology to the modern world. That's where you come in. Can you talk a little bit about your mission statement and what you guys are trying to do here by recreating this ancient technology?
Okay. So I work with a group of people called Avalon Rising, and we're kind of a loose network, but there's a core group of us who kind of want to promote this kind of knowledge, promote the ancient knowledge, with geomancers as well. Sean Kerwin's a trained geomancer, he's done it for many years. So we're working on harmonising these earth energies and balancing geopathic stress and things like this, as well as exposing this ancient knowledge to the general public and bringing it into a form which everyone can kind of understand and get to grips with. And really the key for us is that I believe personally, if we don't know who we were, if we don't understand our lineages, our ancestry, and what our relatives really were up to way back into prehistory, we really don't know who we are as a species, as an individual as well. And so I really feel it's like an empowering tool to actually get a grip of who we are, and also it gives us enough strength to sort of project this into the future as well for future generations, as I believe the ancients were doing by building many of these sites. They were building them for future generations. And so I feel there's an element there of the ancestors and the way that their knowledge seems to be coming back for a purpose. And it really is to sort of get back on the land and to apply this beautiful really knowledge into the modern world. And we do this at conferences, the Megalithomania conference that I organised with John Martineau, and at festivals such as the Big Green Gathering and Out of the Ordinary and Sunrise Celebration. And we do lots of talks, workshops. We build stone circles, we experiment with the geometries and the earth energies, and we're developing this into various different projects to try and get this popularised into the sort of pushing it gradually into the mainstream. Because you look on TV, you look in the schools, there's nothing about prehistory. Right? I mean, I talked to my niece recently, and I said to her, what do you get taught history? What's the oldest history you get taught? They said, well, it's the dinosaurs, and then it's the Romans. And I thought, well, that's an interesting gap you've got there of several million years, and so. You know, that gap, really, there was a lot going on there, obviously. Even if you just stretch a few thousand years back beyond the Romans, the advanced civilization and sophisticated technologies and sciences they were working with is coming to the fore now. And I think we're coming to the same level of technology and understanding, but we've lost that connection with the land and with the soul even of the earth and the universe. We're kind of cut off. And so I think we're just trying to help people get back into that ancient way as far as we can understand it.
Really good. Okay, just moving along because we're running out of data here.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about those Platonic stone shapes that were found?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
The soccer ball kind of
Yeah, I know what you mean. So when we're looking at grids and we're looking at geometries, especially relating to the Earth, we really have to look at the Platonic solids. And essentially Pythagoras and Plato came up with these different forms, going back a few hundred years BC. But in northern Scotland, in Ireland, and various other places around northern Britain, these amazing stone spheres have been discovered, often made of granite or basalt and different forms. And they were carved precisely into all the different Platonic solids and combinations of the Platonic solids, and buried in strata which was the same date as the megalithic sites, the stone circles up in northern Scotland. So we're looking at a Neolithic technology here. Now these stone spheres, which basically are big enough to hold in your hand, were analysed by Keith Critchlow, who's a master geometer and architect. He wrote the remarkable book Time Stands Still, which covered this in great detail, and he concluded that they were for the analysis and determination of spherically Where can I go from there? I've got to do that all again. I can start again.
We can cut away. You could start from he determines the
Okay.
Yeah. And say his name.
Yeah. Keith Critchlow researched these stone spheres in great detail, astute detail, and came to the conclusion that they were for working with systems of spherical geometry. They weren't hunting projectiles, as the archaeologists assumed they were. They were actually sophisticated mapping tools, potentially used to work with spherical geometries with the sky and with the Earth, possibly with surveying or navigation as well. So there's all these different applications that they could have been used for. They could have just been beautiful sort of, gifts, but who knows, And so the fact is, Plato and Pythagoras didn't invent the Platonic solids, so we must stop calling them Platonic solids. Polyhedra is the sort of correct term, megalithic polyhedra perhaps, and so there is a potential that maybe they were working with a grid back then. You get these little clues pop up. I mean, one of the things he came up with, Keith Critchley, when he combined all the different geometries that he discovered with these stone spheres, that they, when combined together, they were the same shape and geometry and design as the final analysis of the Earth grid. And so that really interested me, and I thought, well, there must be a connection there. How to prove that in any academic world, we don't know, but there's definitely some connection there, and I think it's very important. I mean, here we have one, which is this is an icosahedron. This is like the fundamental of the Earth grid itself. It's like a combination of obviously the two sort of more complex Platonic solids. There's also an orgone generator, which is built by lifeforcegenerators.com, and this really is a powerful little tool. And it really does, meditating on this really does help you understand the spherical nature of grids and geometries. Very important.
You want to go into the orgone a little more? Just give a little what an orgone generator is.
Okay.
And most people don't know who Wilhelm Reich was, or
Yeah. Okay.
what's his name?
Well, in the 40s and 50s, Wilhelm Reich was working with this sort of new kind of energy that he called orgone energy, because he felt it was sort of the orgasmic sort of life force energy, and he designed these orgone accumulators, which interestingly were like layers of organic and non-organic material built over a small chamber in the middle, often made of stone or different sort of elements. Now, what it done within that chamber itself, energy would build up, and he could record it and sort of see this increase happening. And then when you look at megalithic chambers and ancient sites, it's the same design. So where the ancients accumulate in this kind of energy for these fertility and potentially other purposes, because it also had an effect on consciousness. That's what Wilhelm Reich was finding. It didn't just affect kind of different bits of matter. It actually had an effect on consciousness, which is what these energies that these ancients were working with, these fertility energies, were John Burke and his team discovered as well. And so they think that there's a connection between the two. And Wilhelm Reich, he went into this whole realm of different applications for this technology. One of them was cloud busting to alter the weather, which is something that, again, the ancients seem to be doing, especially when you look at the mound culture of the whole Midwestern region of North America. They seem to be sort of weather shamans working with lightning, again, which is associated not just with landscape features like pointed pyramids, but also linked with the fertility thing as well, because it creates electric charge, which is what it's all about, this fertility kind of energy.
Great. Yeah.
I'm gonna go ahead and stop right now and switch the battery out.
And do that now then? Or? Yeah.
We're back running.
Yeah, we do.
So there's some ideas that the grid potentially is moving as well. It kind of, in the same way potentially that the magnetic field moves and the poles may shift. Who knows? But one of the ideas is that these crop circles within the ancient megalithic landscape actually mark new areas, new points and new alignments along the grids themselves, and the new earth energies that are either forming or be moving about. And these could be like markers for places that we must visit to get either charged up ourselves or to actually activate energies and the grid itself. So there's all these different modern ways of looking at it, and I think the crop circles obviously give a whole other dimension to the way that we approach the landscape and we approach the ancient sites. Right. What else do you want to do? I'll just quickly go for it.
I think.
Is there anyone to your knowledge who is mapping these and comparing them?
What, the crop circles?
Yeah.
That's something I should be doing.
Well,
I could put it out there. If anyone wants to join me, we could do it.
Yeah. I mean, Freddie Silver did a little bit like that.
Yeah, it needs to be done in real thoroughness. I think that is how to crack it. That's the only way to crack it.
He found 19.47 and 22.5 shot.
Yeah.
And 32 something.
Okay.
But yeah, that's.
could you say something like that?
Yeah, I could. Yeah, it's about what you just said. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. So in my book Earth Grids, I sort of describe the relationship between ancient sites, not only in Britain but all over the world, and how they interact and sort of work and correlate with each other. But another thing worth looking at is crop circles and how they and where they are in the landscape and how they interact with each other, and the distances between them, the differences in degrees between them, angles, and all these different elements. Is definitely worth applying, because for all we know, that could be the code that is trying to be delivered to us through the landscape, through the crop circles. So a whole research effort, it'd be worth applying, going back to the earliest known crop circles and applying what I've done in my book to the crop circles themselves, which I understand people like Freddie Silver and others have already started to do. So let's sort of have a look at that.
Good. And then, before we run out, if you want to plug a book or two,
Yeah.
now's the time to do it. Yeah. Like
Okay.
the Earth Grids book.
How do I subtly do that without sounding shameless?
Well, just start with the research that's in the book, and then and this is covered in my new book.
Yeah. So I could just say most of the research we talked about is covered in the Earth Grids book.
Yeah.
If you want to look further into it, and this, that, and the other,
Yeah.
something like that, really simple.
I'll be a bit more specific.
Okay.
It'll sound less like a plug. So
Yeah.
If you like your Stone Age survival,
Yeah.
and this is, and one of the ways that the Stone Age people ensured their survival, as I mentioned in my book, Stone Age Survival.
Yeah. I did just mention the book there, though,
Right.
didn't I? So that was kind of all right, as long as you put it in. How do I? Yeah. Unshameless plugs. How do you do that?
You just do it casually, and
Yeah. So applying the principles of the fertility energies, and it's basically what I covered in the DVD Stone Age Survival, how it grew from the crop circle phenomenon into the way we're looking at these energies now. I really believe we really do need to get out there and actually sense these energies and tune into them, because many of the ancient legends state at these ancient sites that they are used for fertility. I mean, look at Menantor in Cornwall. You pass through the stone, it increases fertility, it heals you. This is one example out of many thousands around the world. So this kind of application, they were recorded in folklore and in legends. So it's definitely a whole other aspect worth looking into. And all the stuff, all the research on these earth energies and how they relate to grids, covered in the book Earth Grids that I wrote last year. Much more information can be found there, and I can't do it. I can't plug stuff.
Alright, we'll give it one more shot, yeah?
I can't do it.
Let me see if I can help you. We're all kind of
Getting phased out by it, yeah. Fancy, we need a cup of tea, you know what I mean?
you could say.
Well, the first bit was alright, wasn't it?
Yeah, the first bit
Yeah.
when the train came by anyway.
Oh, did it? Right, okay. What do you normally do?
I don't know. I haven't had a book to plug yet. But
Well, Nick Pope's got loads of books.
Um,
Well, no, I'm not worried about it. It's not essential for me. It's fine. I don't need to do it. Well, I mentioned the Earth Grids book. That's the main thing.
Yeah, Earth Grids.
Yeah, and I mentioned earlier in my Psychic Kids book,
Yeah.
Psychic Children, in my book, The Psychic Children. I mentioned that earlier as well.
Okay.
I think I did, yeah. Did I?
I don't know if you did. Well, we can put an insert in,
Yeah.
on the special features, like I said.
Yeah.
Maybe, depending on how we can.
Well, if you've got my name on the screen, when I'm being in, you have Hugh Newman, author of Earth Grids and The Psychic Children, or something. Yeah. Or author of Earth Grids.
Yeah.
Simple.
Certainly, yeah. And grid researcher.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions?
I'm gonna pause and help you just think for like
At the centre of the Earth.
how does
I think we've got.
I can mention the Hopi creation myth.
Yeah. Should we just finish off with that then?
Yeah, why not? God, I don't know what that was for a second.
So, this is, I guess, the prompt would be a lot of this, like you said, has been encoded in mythology and legend.
Mm.
Can you tell us a bit about that?
Mm-mm.
Some wind.
That's right. It sounded like a.
It's getting louder, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Okay.
So much of this grid research is recorded in legends and myths from around the world. In the book Earth Grids, I describe a sort of a creation myth of the Hopi, and how two brothers were brought together by a great grandmother woman, who and they heard the heartbeat of the Creator, and brought this energy into the center of the earth, with one of the brothers bringing harmony and form combined with the sound energy. And it went to the crystal at the center of the earth, and as the sound and the harmony combined, it bounced off the great crystal and popped out to the surface of the earth, to points of power across the globe's surface, into what they called spots of the fawn, which has become part of the sort of Hopi tradition.
Great. Yeah. I think that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah. For now, I mean, we'd love to, again, shoot some stuff with you.
Well, if there's any bits you feel have been missed, I mean, if you just need sound stuff,
Yeah.
and I'm around all through August, however long you